You're listening to Lemons Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality. All right, guys, welcome to Lemons Listening Library. I am Randie Lemons, fantasy author, or RL Rose for those of you in the romance community, and I am joined today by my amazing co-host, Finley, or Finn. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Finley Ray, also go by Finn. I write a myriad of spooky gay stuff, and this is my podcast debut. Yay!
I love it. All right, so we are joined today by our amazing guest, but before we get to her, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of suspense. If anyone is interested in having their services or books or anything else like that broadcast on the show, advertised on the show, go to our Patreon, check that out. It's a great way to support the show and to advertise your books or your services. All right, now, Ariel, introduce yourself to our amazing listeners, please.
Oh, good morning. I am Ariel Dawn. I write pretty much a little bit of everything, but I'm probably best well known for my paranormal romance, my monster romance, and my White Shoes romance. My best-selling series is known as The Monsters of Ashwood. So if you're a dark monster romance fan, you may be familiar with it, you may not. But I'm also well known for my Ava Crowley Vampire Slayer series and my Shifters of Starfall Creek series with Quality Fox as well. But I do write in other genres as well. I dabble a bit in contemporary, rom-com, alien, you name it. And I'm pretty much everywhere. I do a lot of events. I do a lot of online stuff, podcasts, stuff like that. So chances are you'll see me somewhere.
I love it. I love it. Now, with you doing so many different genres and things like that, is it just because you get inspired to tell all these different stories and then they don't fit directly into the one genre that all the authors are supposed to write under?
Yeah, pretty much. I am an ADHD squirrel, and I like the challenge of writing and stuff that I don't normally write in, or that just in general, I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. I'd like to try my hand at that. That's how I ended up writing a contemporary romance rom-com when most of my books are paranormal romance. But at the same time, I love that. I love that challenge, and I write in more than one book at once. So a lot of times I will be like popping in and out of stuff, and it gives me I feel like a fresher take on things. And part of what I love most about writing is the research. So I like researching stuff and trying to figure out how we're going to put it all together.
I've joked in the past that authors need their own browser, like their safe mode or incognito browsers. We need like an author browser.
That has like 16,000 tabs. Yeah.
Yeah. We're not trying to murder anybody. We
Nope.
just want to know what happens when you do and how you take care of it.
This has
Yep.
a disclaimer that says whatever you look up, the FBI can't use against you later.
Oh, my favorite was when I was writing, I think it was In the Shadows, which is part of my Forevermore series, which is like the parent series to the Ava Crowley series. They're like a Marvel universe. And the book takes place in the 1920s. So I was doing like a lot of research because I wanted like the appropriate slang and stuff like that and things going on in the 1920s. And I remember like looking up like cures for a hangover in the 1920s and just went down a rabbit hole. It was so much fun.
Oh my goodness, that's fun. Yeah, I've heard of authors doing post-apocalyptic things. What would you wipe your butt with? What like
The things we think about.
it's interesting to think about what all authors have searched on their computers. You are a real life mermaid and a geek to heart. Oh my gosh, my dog is just going crazy back there. Dude, calm down.
Can't do it. That's bad.
Tell us about you being a wow. Authenticity at its finest. A real life mermaid.
So I've always been obsessed with mermaids, like in general, obviously. My pet name is Ariel Dawn. Um, when I grew up and realized that there were like legit mermaid tails that like you could buy and swim with, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get that, but I want that. So long story short, my husband bought it for me for my birthday a couple years ago. And I've been in love with it ever since. So I have a pool, and in the summertime, I like to put on my mermaid tail and swim around in my pool and freak out my neighbors. It's great. It's a great time. And every now and then, my husband is my true Prince Eric. So he'll pick me up, set me on a raft, and hand me my margarita.
Because you're not gonna worm it across the deck to your.
Nope, nope, nope.
How difficult was it learning to swim in that? Was it challenging at all, or pretty easy to?
I have like the beginner tail. So my
Mm.
tail isn't the silicone based tail that's gonna add like 30 pounds to swim in. It's almost like a swimsuit or a scuba suit type material. And the fin itself, it took a little bit of flopping around to figure it out because it's a lot of core movement, but it's so much fun. And I just love to slap my tail in the water, splash it.
Have you considered doing like any shows or any performances with that, or is it just a for the lulz type deal?
I think it's for the lulz type of deal because I
Gotcha.
cannot hold my breath underwater very long. So I definitely couldn't do anything like that. But
Gotcha.
I just love swimming around my pool like a giant goldfish.
Yeah, those girls that I see doing that, they are under there for a while, and it's almost like I forget that they need to breathe because they're just looking so natural. And I'm like, oh,
And they've
this
got
is
tubes and stuff and they rain and I'm like,
too much.
take
I'm
some
just having
pictures of
fun.
me on a rock. Let me float around my pool. I'm good.
I love it. Now, you mentioned that you are a professed geek. Just kind of all the worlds, or how does that look for you in your life?
So I've always been a bit of a geek, and when I was really young, I always wanted to go to Comic Cons and stuff like that. I'd always had like niche interests in certain fandoms and things. Some of my favorite titles are like Labyrinth is like up there, which is its own geek niche circle. And before like really like the invention of the internet with the accessibility to all this stuff, there really wasn't very far to go for it. So when I realized that there were like Comic Cons and things like that, there were these pockets of places where I could like interact with people who had the same interests. And with the boom of the internet, it just got a little bit more. In high school, I was really into a lot of animes. Again, fanfiction.net, precursoring AO3 was probably some of my first writings as I wrote fanfic. So, and some of my bigger interests, I guess you could say, I'm a huge fan of Labyrinth. I'm a huge fan of Disney. When I do cosplay, I have several Disney cosplays, most of them Ariel, which should not be shocking. But I've also cosplayed Jessica Rabbit, I've cosplayed Poison Ivy, and I've even cosplayed Pinkie Pie from My Little Pony.
That's fun. Those places there's a whole different energy at the Comic Cons and stuff like that. I want to go so bad. There's a couple that are close to us and I have not gone to yet.
You need to check out Dragon Con because Dragon Con I've done it a few times, and the last time that I went was when I was writing. So I went and attended like all the writer panels and the urban fantasy panels and got to see like Jim Butcher and Patricia Briggs and things like that. And they were really helpful and insightful as a writer. And I also did some content panels. I think Katie Osaurus from TikTok had done a panel on like how to not get burned out and make content. And it was like super informative and super cool because I follow her and I love her. So I definitely would recommend Dragon Con, although it is gigantic and it is a giant party for 4 days. But there are a lot of different things to do. So there really is something for everybody there.
With your cosplaying and like your mermaid tail and stuff like that, does that inspire you whenever you get into those different roles and stuff like that, or start your creative juices?
I think definitely. I grew up a theater kid, again, should be no surprise. I've always had that type of imagination, even when I was like a kid, where I would be another character. And slipping into those other characters has always been fun for me. I played dress up well past the age that kids should be playing dress up. I've never stopped playing dress up, if you think about it. I do think, yeah, especially when I'm writing, I really do get into the brains of my characters. And I feel like the fact that I have that theater background and I have that cosplaying background, it's almost like a method acting type situation, but not quite. And then the fact that I work in so many different books, it allows me to slip in and out of these different personalities or these different mindsets. And I feel, to me anyway, that's what make my characters so relatable because for the however long I'm writing Ava Crowley, I'm Ava. My brain is Ava. So until I shut that document down and I go into another document and write somebody else.
That is fascinating because most authors that I know, it's the characters lead them, but you are essentially becoming the character and writing the story. That is very interesting. And it's just like you said, it's a theater-esque thing. Whenever actors
Mhm.
become a persona, that's them. They are becoming that character. That is brilliant. Oh my
And it's
gosh.
still, they still do have a mind of their own and lead me a little bit, because there are plenty of times I don't really outline, I semi-outline, where I do 5 chapters at a time and I know what I'm going to write. And then it gives me room to go off the rails a little bit if they decide to go in a different direction, and then I can come back and set a new set of chapters. But yeah, for a lot of, especially, I want to say Ava is probably the one that I am really closest to. That series is just, I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but she's my favorite series. And I really enjoy writing her and all the characters in that series.
Yeah, it's funny how different authors I've noticed. So some authors have favorites. Some authors' favorites are like the people that they're writing at the moment because they're connected to them. And it's different from author to author. I think everyone does have favorites regardless, but it's different on, is it the character that they first wrote, or the character that they have most in common with, or the character that they're writing right now.
I want to say for me, it's probably a little bit of, that was the series that kind of changed my life. Monsters of Ashwood changed my life too, because that is my best-selling series and it has been a force since I dropped it. But back in 2020, when I had just started writing, I wrote In the Cards, which is the first book in the Forevermore series, and I didn't know at the time it was going to be a series. And Ava popped up as the side character in that series and demanded her own book. And I wrote her first book, which was In the Blood. I wrote it in like 2 weeks. I'm not even kidding. It went fast. And I suddenly realized after I released that, there was a lot more there. And so I ended up going back and making the Ava Crowley series. And In the Blood was pulled. It's not available anymore because it's going to be rewritten to feature Cassius the vampire, to feature his point of view, because the Ava Crowley series has both of their point of views. So I pulled it to be able to give it the Cassius treatment it deserves, and I can't wait to write it.
I love that's becoming a thing. Like whenever I first started writing or first started getting in the writing scene, there was not other point of views. If you wanted another point of view, you had to wait till they wrote a whole nother book that a lot of it was very repetitive because it was just things from their point of view, but it was the same scene happening. And now it's so much more common for it to just slip into different people within one book. And I'm there for that. That is
I think
amazing.
that's a big thing too with romance, just romance in general, because I don't see it too much outside of that. But I am here for it too, because I love me some male POVs when all the stuff is going down. I love it.
It's even in the fantasy scene because I'm reading The Last Empire Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson right now, and it slips from I think there's 3 different point of views that he'll slip into in that. And even every now and then he'll have just like a paragraph from another person. And it's to understand everyone's perspective and like where they're coming from, especially whenever there is like conflict where one character is trying to protect another character, but they're coming off like assholes, or they're coming off like they have no interest in them. It's no, but he really loves you. No, he's doing it to protect you.
And I love that. Like, I love that. I feel like one of the better examples of that for me, for my books, is my Shifters of Starfall Creek series with Quell T. Fox, which is a Wide Shoes series. And you have more, it leans more on the poly side because eventually everybody is just like together. But because there's so many different personalities, and you have the angsty one who is, like you said, like a total asshole, but you're like, oh, but he loves her so much. Can't you see? I love that. I love being able to play, because in my mind, I like to think that we're not the same person to everybody. So everybody's going to see us differently, and they're going to see our reactions differently. So for instance, you have in that book, you have Dustin, who is, he's like massively in love with Jade, but he's just such an asshole to everybody. And you're like, what? And then you have somebody like Jade, she's very alpha female and very tough and but also vulnerable at the same time. And she's so much nicer to Rev than she is to Dustin. And you're like, you know how she feels. I love that. I love playing with stuff like that.
Yeah, getting into their mind and literally listening to their internal dialogue, it just creates these people that you get connected with very quickly. I love it.
And
Oh,
I love it too, because then once you hit some of those moments, those real pivotal moments, it hits different and it's more intense, because you realize that there's been a lot more build up to that point, because you have that other point of view and you have that internal dialogue and that moment where they finally are like, okay, we're on the same page. It hits differently.
yeah. Yeah, the slow burn, the build up, it's all very well crafted. And I don't even think a lot of authors, or at least I personally, I don't plan that out necessarily where it's going to be like very bam, and then it's all this big revelation, but it just comes out that way. And then when it happens, it's no, it's a happy accident.
It does. It's a very natural happy accident. Yeah.
I love it. So there's other areas in your life that I'm sure you get creation or creativity inspiration with too, with you and your husband playing video games and board games and things like that.
Oh, definitely. I'm like one of those people that I can't go anywhere and not come up with a story. Like we literally go on vacation and I'll be sitting there and I'll be people watching and I'll just see like somebody coming down to eat breakfast and I will have created a whole thing. Like it's impossible. My friends and I travel a lot. My husband likes to travel too, so we like to go on vacations and do things. And I think some of that people watching and some of that inspiration definitely comes from there too. Aside from writing, I haven't done any in a while, but I like to get back into it. I paint and draw, which again, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so it's hard for me to drop that it needs to look a certain way, but I've been working on that this year with just drawing or painting just to do it.
What's your
Um,
favorite medium?
I like
Like
paint.
oil, watercolor?
I like
Like what kind of paint?
watercolors. I like
Okay.
watercolors, but I also really like acrylic for different reasons. It just depends on what I'm
Mm-hmm.
painting. But I actually have 2 degrees in art. So I have a photography degree and a digital art degree. So photography was what I did for a while before I started writing. And then once I started writing, I indefinitely put it on hiatus. So I would really love to get back into that because I do miss taking pictures and like editing and stuff like that. But just I can't do it with writing because writing and is so time consuming. And
Right, absolutely.
photos are time consuming too, whether people realize it or not.
Yeah, picking between your hobbies and like what the priority is, that sucks. And I'm right there with you because I do photography and painting and reading and then writing. And it's okay, how do I manage all of this? And you
I
do
have a
have to
clip
prioritize.
that is still in its box. It's been in its box for 3 years because I just can't get down to open it because I know as soon as I open it, I'm gonna be sucked in and I'm gonna have to learn and there's gonna have to be like a learning curve and
Yeah.
then that's gonna take time. So I haven't done it, but I do love to be crafty and I love to be creative. So eventually I would like to start doing stuff with covers as well
Oh,
because I do
nice.
have the artistic background. It's just
Right,
again, it
absolutely.
comes down to like you said, like the time.
Yep. So, and video games and stuff like that, you and your husband play together. What is like one of your favorite video games to play?
So I transitioned into more of the chill gaming stuff like the older I got. I grew up on like Final Fantasy and stuff like that, which I'm like obsessed with. But when my husband and I tend to play together, we tend to play like Mario Kart or Puyo Puyo or like puzzle games. I hate Tetris. He's like a grandmaster at Tetris, so I really don't like playing Tetris with him. And we played Tetris in the dishwasher all the time. Uh,
It's adult Tetris, yeah.
it really
Yeah.
is, and I am not good at it. But a lot of times too, I like to sit and I like to watch him play. There is like a
Mhm.
weird soothing thing when I'm just like watching him do it. And he's more of a retro gamer, so he likes to play more of the older titles, even if he's got Switch and they're on there, but we still have all our old consoles and stuff like that. So sometimes he will fire those up and play. I just watched him play Link's Awakening and I just chilled on the I just there's something about just watching you go from little house to house or whatever. I can play them
Especially Legend
myself,
of Zelda
but I
games,
just get
absolutely.
sucked in.
Go ahead, Finn.
I was gonna say, yeah, Legend of Zelda in particular, absolutely. Because I remember on when I was deployed, that was our just pastime. Was one guy was playing Into the Wild. What is it, Breath of the Wild? And that
Hmm.
was just how we decompressed was watching him play. We didn't
Yeah,
even have
no,
to do
no,
anything.
like it's
It's
got to be
so
a thing.
soothing.
I'll be like, "Oh, can I watch you play a game?" He'll be like, "What?" And I'm like, "Please, what do you want to watch me play?" Another one I really like to watch him play is Metroid.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because I love the
I watched my
soundtrack to
sister.
Metroid.
Oh yeah, I watched my
Um,
sister playing that growing up.
but his favorite is Mega Man, so he plays a lot of that.
I used to play the hell out of Mega Man growing up.
Yeah.
I'm with you too, though, on the more chill games. Growing up, I did play Final Fantasy and Dragons of Lagoon and like all that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
now I'm playing unboxing games. There's
Hmm.
this unboxing game where you move into this house and there's boxes and you
Hmm.
unbox them and put this stuff in the boxes. I'm like, this is what
It
I'm doing.
scratches a different itch. It really does, where it's just putting all this. I don't know what it is, man.
It's so funny. I love that. So you mentioned that you have your ADHD mind and you're neurodivergent and things. How does that
Excuse
work through both being an adult and a writer?
So I really only started, I don't want to say like treating my ADHD because I've never been medicated for my ADHD, which is a blessing and a curse. But because I was able to go through my entire life almost making it work for me, when I got to be an adult and didn't realize all of the things that were attached to my ADHD, even though I was in special ed because I have a math disability, I didn't really start realizing how it affected other things in my life until I became like an adult. Oh, and I want to say probably in the last 10 years is when I really started to understand that there was a correlation between my ADHD and executive function and the reason
Hmm.
that I have choice paralysis and can't, or that I want to do things, but I can't do them, or I can only do so many at a time, or the attention span is just not there. So once I started to realize that I have hyperfixation is tied into that, executive function is tied into that, and all these other things, I think I really learned that I had made it work for me, but to an extent, it wasn't working well. So with writing, the way that kind of pulls things back in is it's both, I always say it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because I can be extremely productive. I can be extremely hyper fixated on my books. I can write a book in 2 weeks. I can write a book in 4 days. I've done it. I don't advise it. But at the same time, there has to be a balance. So I'm trying, that's what I'm learning more. So as I go along, because I like to say that I can do certain things, but then I don't learn. I just keep
Hmm.
repeating and I stress myself out. This year, I tried to really slow it down. I've been trying to work on my mindset a lot, build routines, because routines are very, very key for people with ADHD. And it's taken me a year to build the routine that I have. And that didn't come without some setbacks or forgetting to do stuff or just not doing it when I felt like it or that sort of thing. So I do think the two definitely work together. It's just finding that balance of not going over the edge and just sitting at my computer for 12 hours and just ignoring everything else, or
Hmm.
not doing everything else for 12 hours and not getting any writing done. It's finding that balance. But because I know now that my ADHD affects all of those things, I'm a little bit better and a little bit more aware on how to tailor that in.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because the way that you're describing the balance, you're describing my husband's personality and then my personality.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is chaos and impulse, and my husband is routine, structure, and we have learned to cross over our things with each other because,
Mm-hmm.
like, he's very creative, but he goes into analysis paralysis and he wants everything perfect before he even starts. So a lot of times he just doesn't even start projects because of that. And I'm like jumping from project to project. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've learned to kind of balance each other with that. Like, I need more structure, he needs more just let loose.
I always like to say my husband and I are like the rock and the kite. And I am the kite, and he is the rock.
He's gonna ground you.
Yeah, he really does. He doesn't let me get too far up there. He'll be like, all right, gotta come back down.
Love that. You spoke on executive function. Can you explain that a little bit?
Executive function, to my best ability, is my ability to do certain mundane tasks, is how I like to say it. So
Hmm.
it's for me to be able to, for a person with ADHD in general, who is neurodivergent in general, everything takes energy. Even getting up in the morning and going to take a shower, that takes energy. Being able to force yourself to get up from the couch from doom scrolling to be able to, I need to go eat because you have to remember to eat. I know people without ADHD do not understand how do you forget to eat, but it happens all the time with ADHD. So things like that. It's the normal or the mundane tasks of life that take up energy, and it's once you're aware that it takes the energy to do it, you have to force yourself to do it. It's not an intrinsic thing. That's why the routines are so big for people with ADHD. It takes 30 days to start a routine for a typical person. For a person with ADHD or who is neurodivergent, it's going to take longer than that. So that's where the executive function comes in, is that mental focus or that mental clarity that it takes, plus the energy that it takes to be able to go complete the task that typical people just do without thinking about it.
Yeah, that's exhausting. It's
Mm-hmm.
exhausting just trying to wrap my brain around it, but then also remembering all the things that, like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's me. How did that affect you growing up? Obviously, ADHD is something that most people have from childhood. A lot of people go undiagnosed. What did that look like for you?
As a kid, it probably looked a lot like what it does now, but more chaotic because I was a kid that grew up in special ed. So, on top of being a weird kid, and I was the weird kid, everybody knew that I was the weird kid. On top of being that, I was definitely bullied for a lot of that stuff. With that coming into play, I was able to shift that hyperfixation into my fandoms or into writing. Like I've always written. I wrote poems when I was like a kid. I wrote short stories when I was a kid. I wrote fan fiction, stuff like that. So I feel like for me when I was a kid, it looked more like, at least from the educational standpoint, it looked like she's daydreaming, she's not paying attention, she's not very good at this. But at the same time, I was reading books that were like way above my levels, right? Or I was writing stories that were way above what like a fourth grader should be writing. So stuff like, so that's what it looked like for me as a kid. But I think we didn't really, even though I had a lot of support, me as a child didn't really know how to streamline that or understand. I think even at the time, because I'm 39. So at the time, people didn't even really realize how the executive function and how the brain was impacted by that at that point in time. And I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 4, which is looking back is a huge feat because diagnosing ADHD in girls, especially back then, was like unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah, especially like you said for girls, I know so many adult people who are undiagnosed and I'm like, you are autistic. I'm just gonna tell you right now. How did
Yeah.
that affect your self-esteem and stuff like that?
I think for better or for worse, I've always had trouble just accepting that like people just didn't get me. Be like, I don't understand why. Like, so I've always, even though I lacked self-confidence with certain things, I always just was like, but why? I'm so cool and I'm so funny. And then I think a lot of that more came out with I've had 2 best friends since I was very young, since about 4th grade. So I just really latched on to 1 or 2 people, and I latched on to reading and writing and doing art in the absence of those other things, which I know now is probably that's hyperfixation. That's my niche. That's what I fell back into. But then it was just like, this was the safe space. This was where I felt like I could pretend to be other people and I could do all the things that I do now.
I love that. And I think that probably having those people that you were so close to helped because it's like, and especially I think with neurodivergent people, 1 or 2 people is more than enough for us. Any more than that, this is exhausting. I
It's
can't
also
keep up
like
with.
we travel in packs sort of thing. So
Half consent.
it's like neurodivergent people just
We're over
gravitate
here.
towards one another. They do.
That
They really do.
yeah, that's mainly how I figured out I was neurodivergent, potentially undiagnosed autism. We'll get into that in my episode. It's a doozy. But was when me and my wife got married, she started noticing things I would forget, certain patterns I had, and she was like, "Honey, I don't know. I think you got ADHD or like on the spectrum or something." And I
I
was like,
tell
"Oh,
my
that's
husband
why
that
I'm the
all the
way I
time. He
am."
doesn't believe me.
Yeah, my son, he's autistic and he's been diagnosed since he was 4. And my husband, as he was blended family, so he's getting to know Mikey and everything and all the things Mikey does. And he's like, oh shit, I do that. Oh, I do that. And it's just like all these things of, oh yeah, you're autistic too, love. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
My
I'm the one to
husband
tell
has
you.
ADHD.
Yep. It's a beautiful thing. I honestly, I love neurodivergent people. I think that there is something about neurodivergent people that they don't develop the mimic mechanism as other people do, where they just mimic stuff that they see. They are authentic. They are real with like how they feel. They just say what is on their mind. And I don't have to worry about whether or not a lot of people do learn how to put on a face, but it's more of an authentic face for them. Like a lot of times you are just seeing them for who they are.
Yeah. I do think there is a difference, definitely, obviously, but it's almost like it's just another wavelength with how you understand. I think I saw a TikTok somewhere where somebody was just like, they just went, ah! And the other person in the background went, ah! And that is neurodivergency to a T. Like just without you got it. You know what I mean? Whereas you do that with a typical person and they'll just be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
So I do feel like it is almost like another language, that to have that connection to be able to understand that other language.
Yeah,
My
I
husband
love
has
that.
ADHD. My friends have ADHD, which is funny just because, like I said, you just gravitate. And my husband is known for a long time that he's ADHD, but he's the perfectionist ADHD, and I'm the chaos ADHD.
Yeah, I think that's our situation too.
Yep.
Now, tell me about the moment when you realized that you could finish a product or a project. You went from your fan fiction and stuff like that with that first book and diving into it and being like, okay, I'm going to become an author. What did that look like for you?
So I've always written, and for before 2020, pre-pandemic, I'd had 3 books that I was working on for the majority of 10 years. And I always was like, I'm going to be an author. One day I'm going to publish these. But I just kept working on them in pockets here or there, or I would sit there and I would work on them for hours, but then nothing would ever happen. And I got to a point where I said, I really want to publish something someday, but like, I don't think these books are ever going to make it. But like, I've never written anything new. I haven't written anything new in 10 years. So maybe if I try to write something new, or if I try to write like a short story or something, like maybe that would be easier to finish. So I found the New Romance Cafe, which they do have a Facebook community, and they are wonderful. They were putting together an anthology, and they had signups for it. It was a charity anthology to benefit breast cancer awareness. It was called Fated Mates. And I was like, oh, so it's like paranormal romance and stuff. I like Buffy. I like Supernatural. I could write that. So I gave myself and they said that I think it had to be like 20,000 words or less. So it was short. I was like, maybe I could do that. Maybe if I sign up for this and give myself a deadline to hit, maybe that will force me to do it. And then maybe I will complete it. And then the pandemic hit. So I started writing, and writing became like my job at the time, even though it wasn't, because we were all home. And it was really like what I tuned in for every day. So I like, all right, we're going to write this, we're going to write that, and then we're going to move things along. My first short story, Faded, came out in April of 2020. So it was like the catalyst. And once I'd finished it and it had 2 rounds of editing, I was like, I wrote a story. Like, I completed the project. And there was this moment before I really started writing it, or even before I started getting all of my stuff together, when I had signed up and I was in the process of writing it, where I was like, what if nobody likes this? What if I'm terrible? What if I do this and it completely flops and people hate it and I suck? And then there was a light bulb moment. I like to say my light bulb moment. I went, what if I did it anyway? What if I did it anyway and I just could say that I published a story? That would be it. I just want to say that I was a published author. I published something. And then I put out Faded, and then I started working on In the Cards, which was my first book. And it came out in an anthology because I thought, if I could write a story, I can write a book. And it came out in an anthology in October of that year. And then In the Blood, my second book, came out in December of 2020, and it's just been history ever since.
That gave me chills. What if I just did it anyways?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be your sticker.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
And I met my publisher while I was writing my short story and had signed up to write my book for her anthology. And it really was just like writing Faded just changed my life. It was like, what if I did it anyway? And then by 2021, I signed with Naughty Nights Press, LLC. And by March of 2021, I was co-writing Shifters of Starfall Creek. It is what it is.
So was it last year that you became full-time author?
Yes, last year I officially left my job of 13 years to pursue this crazy dream.
I love watching your journey. I love watching all of the panels that you go to, all the conventions that you go to. It is inspiring for other authors too. You do things that I'm like, I want to be there one day. I want to do that, where I am just going to conventions and meeting other readers and authors. Girl, you are goals.
Thank you, because sometimes it's really hard for me to see that, especially because writing is so isolate. And a lot of times, because of my ADHD, I don't really sit with things. I just need to move to the next thing. So thank you. That really gets me. So thank you.
Yeah, girl. Yeah. Like I said, especially the things that you put together, people don't realize the effort that it goes into being an author in today's time. Before,
Yeah.
you had an agent, you had a publishing house that marketed you, you had all this stuff. You have to do all of those roles yourself. And like,
Mhm.
whenever you said, I mentioned your cover picture on your Facebook, I was like, oh, I love your cover picture. You're like, oh yeah, I do photo shoots for my books and stuff as promotional material. And I'm like, oh my God, you just connected all together. It is awesome.
And it's also an excuse for me to get my photos done and look pretty.
I love it. And then you're like,
Yeah,
oh,
do
also
what you
that's a
gotta
tax
do.
write-off too. And I was like, okay,
Oh
I need
yeah.
to take that as a note. Has there been any stress or did you have expectations of being a full-time writer, and how does that look with actually being it, or how does that feel now that you've accomplished the dream?
So It's one of those things that, and yes, from the outside, definitely I've talked to people about this where they're like, you're living the dream. And I'm like, yes, but the dream is not always a dream. Sometimes it has days that it's a nightmare, which is with anything. It's not always smooth sailing. But being as I've been doing this now for 4 years, and now that I am full time for a year, there are days that are definitely, it's a lot more stressful. And that's why I think sometimes it's really helpful to hear from people like you, or when I go to an event and I have literal fans that like walk up to my table and I'm like, you fan of me? Me?
You're
Like
real.
for real? It really helps. One of the things that that I've learned in this last year, mostly like going full time, is that success is what you define it as. Nobody else can really define what your success is. And that's something that I've struggled with, but also that I've been really trying to wrap my head around, because for some people, success might look like I finished this short story and it got published. For some people, success might look like I hit the keys on the keyboard and I wrote today. Success for other people might be like, I made 6 figures on this book. Success for some people might be like, I only got 1,000 page reads today. Oh my God, I got 1,000 page reads. It's really defined by you and not anybody else. And I think that has been the driving thing in this last year for me, was realizing, because I have my own sort of set of goals, and because of my neurodivergency and my perfectionism, where I'm like, I need to hit up here, and I don't always remember that being down here is a success too. So it's finding the balance between there as well. A really good example would be my Kickstarter. I worked on this Kickstarter for a year. Last year, after I left my job, it was my big idea. I was like, I'm going to run a Kickstarter. I'm going to make a special edition of this book. I'm going to do all this stuff, and then I'm going to make all this money, right? I
Right.
feel like the idea that everybody has, right? And
Right.
and through the whole thing, I poured myself into it. I learned everything. There was quite a bit of an investment up front to have everything ready, like what I needed to have for backers to look, for formatting, all the stuff. And then I ran the Kickstarter a year later, and it was the craziest 14 days of my life. And I didn't hit my goal, but I was $300 away from hitting my goal. And
I mean,
there,
that's
and
still
to me, I
awesome.
was like, ugh, I didn't even hit my goal. But there were other people who were like, but you raised almost $5,000 and you are just like, that's a feat. And I'm like, you're right.
Absolutely.
You're right. So I feel like that's a really good example of that success. My success is going to be different than other people's. And it's not all going to look the same way. And so instead of looking for the negatives, we have to look for the positives. We have to look for the wins, because they're all around us. We just have to look for them.
Yeah. And even when you have the big goals, it's way up here. Learning how to break down little steps, that was a goal. That was a goal. That was a goal. And make them into smaller, achievable goals. That's huge. And it sounds like that's exactly what you figured out how to do. Your goal is still this. That's in time goal. But then also the little things too.
Yeah, definitely. That's
I
been the
love that.
biggest thing I've learned this year about going full time, because at times it is very stressful, especially when I'm trying to map out my day, and I don't just write and publish my own books. I do freelance work as well. So I do developmental editing, I do blurb services, I do graphics, I do TikTok trailers, stuff like that too. So on top of the writing stuff, it can be very chaotic, and it can be very like, this happens here, this happens there, but it has to find that balance, and that's what I've been working on this year. So
Yeah. And I think that's another thing too, is especially me, whenever I first started writing, I did not realize there was a whole community out there. I was like,
mhm.
okay, I'm going to write this book, I'm going to publish it. And then nothing happened. It was just like crickets, right? Besides friends and family and my followers on Facebook, after those people bought it, it was just crickets. But people don't realize that the community that is out there, that all the other things that you can do, like the ARC copies, like there's just so much that goes into publishing nowadays that looks very different than what it used to. Getting that community and building people who you can connect with, networking, the
Mhm.
events that you can go to, that is what really helps you succeed in this world.
Especially independent authors, because
Mhm.
obviously your traditional authors, that's going to be a different ball game. There's still a lot of that, but I feel especially with indies, it's I always say that's the stuff they didn't tell me about publishing a book. You think that it's just going to be like you write this story and you click publish and then people are just going to buy your book.
Yeah.
And you don't realize you need to have newsletters and you need to go on podcasts and you need to go to events and you need to make promo graphics and you need to be on TikTok and you need to be so it is definitely but with that being said, the community, at least to me, the experience I've had with the community has always been uplifting and always been positive since I entered this community with my short story, like from day one. I know there are a lot of people that have negative impressions or they have negative experiences with people, screwing them in the community, for lack of a better term. But I've never experienced that, which I've been lucky. I've seen other people experience it, but I always try to come at this community the same way that it was there for me. So I try to help where I can. I'm not an expert at anything, but I try to help where I can, when I can, and try to be the cheerleader for everybody. Because I think too, sometimes people think that you have to be competitive because this other person is doing the same thing as you, but you don't. Like when you win, we all win. Like
Yes.
we're all in this together. High School Musical.
Yep.
You know?
And that is something that I agree 100% on. Even if someone wrote a story that was very similar to mine, the characters had elemental abilities. He went to a school. There was a male character, it was same age. My story, the way that I tell it, is still going to look different from the way that this other person tells it. And
100%.
I'm not I want them to succeed, because guess what? When they finish that book and they're like, I need other recommendations like this book, I'm going to recommend my book because it's like that book. We can support each other and uplift each other, and there's no competition. If anything, like I just said, that recommendation of, oh, it's similar to that book, you should come read this one to get your fills. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nope, I agree. I think that is something we all need to remember, is let's just support each other. There's enough people tearing us down in our lives that let's not do that. Let's not continue that.
It's funny because I started this journey even before I started writing. I was a reviewer. So I reviewed a lot of romance books at the time. And I always tell this story because I think it's funny. I always enjoyed romance, but I never enjoyed like romance as a genre. Like I enjoyed books with romance in them. But when I started reviewing books, because I was trying to do stuff at home to make a little extra cash on the side, and I started reviewing books for like websites and stuff. And I started reading romance, which wasn't my forte at the time. And I think the very first one I read was Making Her His by Lucy Leroux. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it is a stepbrother romance. So that's really one to fall into for your first book. And I remember giving it like this horrible review. Not horrible, but oh my God, people talk like this. Oh my God, oh my God. But with that being said, I understand at the time I wasn't the audience for it now. And it kicked me into starting Wrong Turn Romance, which is my bookstagram, where I started featuring like all these books, right? These romance books with either bad covers or crazy synopsis or blurbs or whatever, what have you. And so I feel like starting with that, it's also added this extra layer to being in the indie world and being a writer, that not every book is going to be for everybody. But at the same time, there's a lid for every pot. And it also helps me remember that like when I'm writing, to be able to hit an audience that it's not meant for too. But also that if I get that review or whatever that somebody doesn't like it, that's okay. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, that's huge. And that's a skill, I think, that you have to learn as an author. Or if you don't learn, you're just going to suffer a little bit more, unfortunately. But if you can learn that skill of, like you said, this book probably was not for them. And that's what's so hard about marketing, is trying to figure out how to market it to where you're going to reach your intended audience, because there's so many steamy romances, like grandma probably shouldn't read that. And if she does read it, she's an amazing grandma.
I find that especially with my family. I have some of my family reads my books, right? And my favorite is always my dad's trying to read my reverse harems and I won't let him. And thank God he doesn't know how to work Amazon, because if he did.
Had that conversation with my mother with my books coming out. She's, oh, can I read this to grandma? I'm like, Mom, I write about demons and grandma's a Baptist. Probably not. Probably not a good call. Don't do
My
that.
favorite. I do have family members that I have. My one aunt is reading one of my reverse harems right now, which was I gave her the whole spiel or whatever because she wanted to read Monsters of Ashwood, which I'm always like, if my
Here's
family
the
members
trigger
try to
list
read
first,
Monsters of
Mom.
Ashwood, there's a list of trigger warnings you got to read first.
Exactly.
We got to get cool. Everyone's got to get cool about some stuff real quick.
I always make the joke to my family, especially with Monsters of Ashwood, because it is my best-selling book. So obviously I do have family members who are like interested, and they're like, I'm gonna read your best-selling book. And I was like, if you ever want to see me at Christmas, don't read it. You'll look at me different.
My sister, she's very Christian and she's also very supportive, and she bought my bromance books, and it's biker books. So it's very drug related and just sexual content like all through it. And I'm like, do not recommend this book. And she's never read it. She just has it sitting on her shelf and at her. And I was like, please do not recommend this to any of your friends. Like they will probably not talk to you anymore.
I have several family members, though. The ones that I recommend really for everybody, not just like my family, but just in general, like if you're like trying to like, if you want to take a stab into Ariel Dawn, I really do recommend the Ava Crowley series, because it is very Buffy meets Supernatural, and it really does build. So there is spice, but it builds. It's not in your face like maybe some of my other books, but it's a much longer story. It's a much bigger world. And so it does have appeal with a lot of those things. There is a reverse harem novel in the Hunter Games series, which is connected to the Ava Crowley series, but it's not the entire series. So you'll get bits and pieces of some of my other types of writing in that series, but it's not the entire series.
That's awesome. I love it. So essentially, most of your books, it sounds like they are connected somehow within the same realm.
Most of them, yeah. The Forevermore books are like the parent series to the Ava Crowley books, and the Hunter Games series is the companion to the Ava Crowley books. I like to say that they are acts, because I call them my Marvel universe. Their Forevermore is like Act 1. Those are all the history books. And then you have Act 2, which is Ava Crowley and Hunter Games, where we have the big overarching storyline. But you can also read those series independently of themselves and not miss anything. But if you read them together, obviously you get like a bigger picture. And then there will be an Act 3, which will have more Ava and Hunter Games books. And then there will eventually be an Act 4.
That's awesome. I love that. Now, this podcast, you being on this podcast, is the beginning of a chaotic week or month for you, right? You've got a lot of stuff coming up.
Oh, yeah. Today at 1 p.m., I will be on a panel over at Bite Me MonsterCon. It is on Facebook, so just search Bite Me MonsterCon. I will be going live tomorrow as well for Bite Me MonsterCon, because it is a weekend event. So I will probably be doing a live reading of Voices in the Dark, which is from my best-selling series, Monsters of Ashwood. It's the first book. And then I have coming up here on the 24th, I am doing a local signing in Pleasant Hills, Pennsylvania at Coffee Tree Roasters. On the 31st, I am doing a local Pittsburgh, PA signing in Shadyside at another Coffee Tree Roasters. And then in September, I have Getting Witchy with It, which is September 14th. The weekend after that, my besties and I are traveling to the Mothman Festival, because I have a Mothman obsession and I am really excited. My little Manny, my Mothman.
Oh, that's cute.
And then after that, I have Authors in the Steel City on September 28th, which is another local Pittsburgh event. And then the following week after that, I go on my Disney vacation, and then I have Flirty in Tampa. So
Jeez, yeah. You're gonna be
nuts.
so burnt out after this. You're like, I need 3 months of just no one talk to me.
Oh, once I get into October, it's lit, because when does everybody want to read paranormal romance and monster romance? Halloween. Yeah. And Halloween is my Christmas. So I will definitely be busy. I usually do in my group in Halloween. In October, I do Ariel Dawn's 13 Days of Halloween. I do it every year. So if you're not in my Ariel Dawn Dusk Chasers group, definitely get in there for that. I feature a different author every day, and I feature a different prize every day. And there is a big prize at the end, like on Halloween. It's a Halloween drawing. So it's always a fun time. So that'll be
Say the name of that again, Ariel Dawn.
My group is Ariel Dawn's Dusk Chasers. All my branding is moons and stars and dawns and dusk. And the event is called Ariel Dawn's 13 Days of Halloween. I coincided with the ABC Family's 13 Days of Halloween.
Yeah, my nostalgia senses were definitely tingling as soon as you said that.
Yeah, and I love it. Like I said, I feature different prizes and stuff every day, so you can always enter to win. And I usually do something fun. Share me your favorite vampire. There's a different game every day, and it's fun. It's a blast. And usually I have I'm doing a boo basket this year. Usually in the past I did like books or like a small like gift basket. But I've been seeing a big thing trending this year is the boo basket. So I'm gonna do a boo basket. I'm really excited about it.
I'm with you, Finn. I was like, oh, Halloween Town, instantly.
Oh, absolutely. How else were you
Hocus
supposed to watch
Pocus.
Focus Focus back in the day?
Hocus
Yeah.
Pocus is like one of my favorite like Halloween movies. Like, yeah.
With you living in Pennsylvania, have you spent any time in Salem at all?
I
Have you been
have.
down
I went last year. I did Romanticon, and then my girlfriends and I took a road trip to Salem. So we went in the summer, which, if
there? Good call.
yeah, I'm going in fall this year because I'm doing Getting Witchy, which is in Salem in September. But
I
in
was
the
gonna say how
summer,
close. Yeah, how close to October? Because we went 3 weeks out from Halloween, and it was crazy.
it's September 14th. So I'm sure
Okay,
it's
you
going to
might.
be still somewhat crazy, but not as
Yeah, you're gonna be like right on the cusp of the crazy.
But we went in July last year, and
Hmm.
it was even like it was rainy one of the days. It was still like perfectly gloomy Salem. It was like vibe.
Very pretty. Yeah.
But yeah, this will be my second time going back this year for Getting Witchy. So we're going up. I'm going with a friend who's coming to be my assistant, and my two besties were my assistants last year. So I love it. I can't wait to go back. I'm so excited.
Are
And
you
I
going
definitely
next year?
last
I'll
year
be
I
going
visited.
next year.
Last
Oh,
year I visited the Hocus Pocus places, and I was really excited. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to go see them again.
how did you feel when you walked in the house and it wasn't a house? It was like a museum, and it was like completely different than the.
It was completely different. I still enjoyed it. I thought it was
It was so
interesting.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did a walking tour too, which was fun. And we did the graveyard and stuff like that. We did the Halloween museum. Like, it's definitely a fun
Mhm. Oh, absolutely.
All that's in Salem.
time.
Oh, there's
And
so much in Salem. It's such a cute
we
little town.
stayed at the Salem Inn, and we did have a ghostly experience. And I could not sleep the rest of the night.
What happened? Okay, now you got to tell us what happened.
Ah,
The way the room was set up was you had one bed against one wall and you had one bed against the other wall facing each other. Totally weird, right?
Hmm.
So I was in bed with my one friend, and the other friend was in the bed across from us. And I literally woke up to the sound of someone shrieking, like right next to me shrieking. And I turned to look to see if it was she was out like a light, and the one across from me was out like a light. But the one next to me woke up and went, "Why are you screaming?" And I said, "I'm not screaming." And we like yelled for the other girl, and she was like, "What?" What I mean, I was like, "Oh crap." So I obviously was not able to sleep the rest of that night. And then I went out and purchased a little onyx pyramid
I
and
feel like
set
it's
it
not
by
coming
my
home
window
with
that
me.
night.
Respect. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I was like, "Oh my God, no, thank you." I was terrified.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
I love that. Oh gosh, that's funny. That yeah, no, not taking home that spirit with me.
If you need protective charms, Salem's the place to get them. They have so many
Mhm.
cool little witchy
Yeah,
stores.
so I went out the very next day and I was like, I just got a little onyx pyramid, ward off crap, and then there we go.
Love it. I love that our generation seems to be the generation we collected rocks as kids and we collect rocks as adults. We just are, I don't think our generation has ever grown up. And I think
No,
that's a beautiful thing.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. Yes.
So with your writing and stuff like that, what motivates you to keep writing and to have all these readers review and read your books?
So I think what really keeps me writing, honest to God, is the readers. It's going to events and having people come up and go, "I really love your book." Or it's having somebody review it and say, I couldn't stop reading this. Last year when I left my job, it was a huge transition, and it was not an easy transition. And I was definitely, there were some points where I was extremely low, I was extremely depressed. I didn't know how I was going to do any of this, right? Everything was surmounting. I just gone from working the job for 13 years to trying to do this thing on my own with no direction really, other than my delusional butt and my Leo confidence. So there were definitely moments where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And in those moments, I went and read my reviews. I did what they tell you should never do. People say all the time, reviews are for readers and not for authors, right? And there definitely is a truth to that. But I went and read my reviews, and those reviews are what kept me going. I need to write another book, because seeing those reviews, even the 1-star ones, I had one person give my Monsters of Ashwood a 1-star review because while they liked that Jenna and Daigle like asked for consent, They didn't like all the breeding kink stuff, and they were like, it was just too much sex for me. And I was like, I'm turning that into a review because that is somebody's 5-star read.
Oh, absolutely. Threaten me with a good time.
Like, exactly. So even reading stuff like that, that really helped propel me. And when I was writing my books and releasing my arcs, getting some of that feedback was pivotal. And I was like, I need to keep doing this, because even on the days that it sucks or that I have major imposter syndrome, I can see the physical evidence that somewhere my book touched somebody and they enjoyed it. And that's enough for me.
Yeah. And with your books and stuff like that, you represent now, is your lead character, do you often have them as neurodivergent, or I know that you have representation of different things within your writing?
I tend because to me, my characters are real people in a sense. So I write them as if they're real people. So I do feature neurodivergent leads and supporting roles. A lot of times I tend to flock towards the tough badass chicks, but at the same time they're flawed. So they might, like someone like Ava, who might be like this kick butt slayer, taking names and whatnot. She's got issues. She's got trauma. You read something like, I also write young adult under 80 Luna. I have a series called the Aldridge Academy series, and it's very fantasy paranormal. And the lead main character in that series is on the spectrum. I have books under Ariel, like I want to say The Marriage Pact, which is a contemporary romance, but you still have characters like Vanessa who are very like, they're very confident in things, but they still have anxiety. Stuff like that. Jenna from Voices in the Dark has dealt with suicide and depression and all kinds of, and part of her journey in there, you see her trying to get better, going to the halfway house or going to therapy, taking her meds, ways to, and I consulted my husband's best friend is a psychologist. So as I was writing it, I was consulting her with, so that I could make sure that I could get the representation correct, but also the resources correct, things like that.
That's awesome. And you also represent like the LGBTQ community in your writing as well, right?
Yes, I do write a lot of characters who are gay, bi, poly. That's, to me, love is love, like no matter what. So I write all pairings. I have male, female, I have male, I have the poly white choose stuff. And I am eventually going to release a female sapphic novel at some point, because I just really want to write one.
I just learned what that word meant the other day in another podcast, and I was like, okay, hang on, I have to stop you. What does sapphic mean? And then now I know, I don't have to ask anymore, but I still wanted to bring it up because I'm a
And
total nerd like that.
and I read everything. So I read all of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I have realized, especially meeting you guys and doing this podcast, that my realm of reading is so small and I have so much expanding to do.
And another thing I like to do, not just in general, is I like to try to feature diverse cast members just in general in my books. The Ava Crowley series and the Forevermore series are probably one of my more diverse books, where I have Asian American, I have Italian American, I've got Irish, I try to really put not as much as I can, but as authentic as I can to those characters. So you have characters like Diedrich, who are from Ireland, like he's an immortal, he's very old. You have characters like Vinny, who I'm currently working right now, where he is Italian American New York. And then you have characters like Eden, who are from England. And so just, I really do try to build diverse casts and diverse worlds. So.
So when you get ready to go into audiobooks, you're gonna have to have some badass narrators. That's all I'm
Oh my
saying.
God. Oh my God. I can't. Eventually, I will be doing a Kickstarter for an audiobook. I'm not going to tell you which one it is because I want to make you sweat a little bit. But I'll be doing
Let everyone
a
vote. Be like, please, I want this one as an audiobook.
I will be doing a Kickstarter for it, because the book is dual POV or multi POV. So
Mhm.
I'm going to want more than one audio narrator. And I'm just thrilled. I can't wait to get to the point where I like can hear somebody read what I wrote, and then I can cringe because I wrote that. Oops.
Yeah, that is one thing that with my first series that I did, I actually started tearing up whenever the narrator started sending me stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my character coming to life. It felt like literally my character was just rising up off the page and becoming this real live, touchable person. And it is emotional.
Yeah. What's a funny story? So while I was talking to another author friend, we were talking about audiobooks and things like that. And I was put out like a search or whatever. Let me know who your favorite narrator is, right? So that I could go listen to people and try to build a list or whatever. And she was like, James Marsters. And I was like, I am not delusional enough to think that I can get James Marsters, but let's put it out there into the universe because I like to manifest.
Yeah.
I said I would die if he could narrate Cassius from Ava's books because partly because Cassius is inspired by spikes. I was like, I would just die.
Yeah. Yeah. Manifesting is huge. And sometimes that it's just lining things up and then it
I
happens.
like to say I manifested this entire career. There you
Yep. I love the idea of manifestation, but it has to be more. You are doing so much work that actually is pushing it along. You can't just write it out and be like, okay,
Right.
please. You're doing so much, but manifestation is putting it into your mind, putting it out into the world. It's almost like that extra step of, okay, hold me accountable.
This year, I did a lot of working with Law of Attraction. I bought some Law of Attraction journals. I bought the Gratitude Journal. And part of my routine was that, like, when I go on my lunch or something, I would go outside and touch grass for 5 minutes. And then I would do my journaling, my Law of Attraction. And I really do feel like some there's some meat to that where when you shift your mindset into, like you said, you're doing the work to push it along, but the manifestation puts the idea there, right? It's looking around you for the wins instead of the losses. Once you reframe your mind to look for those things, you see them more. And so as you see them more, you're like, I manifested it. But a lot of it has to do with you and the work that you're doing.
Yeah. And something that I've realized with like your belief system, if you do not believe you're an author, then you're not going to become one. If you
Yep,
believe that you're an author and you believe that you write amazing stories that people are going to connect with, you become that person.
you do.
Yeah, I
You
love that.
absolutely do.
Mindset is huge. Mindset is very huge. So, with mindset, you help baby authors, as you like to say, in the community.
So I think a lot of it comes from I've just always been a person that likes to help people. It's just who I am, whether I want to be or not. So if somebody says to me that they have a problem, I'm a fixer. My immediate thing is to go in and fix your problem. So a lot of times, especially when I started my freelance stuff, working with blurbs and stuff like that, I tend to just be in community driven spaces, whether it's on Discord or whether it's on Facebook groups or whatever. And if somebody posts a question or if somebody is looking for assistance, and I have some sort of advice to give, I'm gonna give it. You can take it with a grain of salt or whatever, but I've helped people do developmental editing. It's their first book. I've helped people with they need blurb help, or maybe they came to me for blurb help, but they don't know anything about covers. So the community was always there for me to help me when I had those questions. So I just see it as not even like really just paying forward, but just being part of a good community and being able to help others. Like I said, when they win, we all win. So it's just
Yeah.
and I,
And
and
shameless
I like
plug.
to say, hmm?
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and I like to say that we all started somewhere. We were all a baby author at one point, where we started with a book and or a short story, or we didn't know, okay, how do I find an editor, or what kind of cover do I need, or I have a question, can I quote song lyrics in my book? You don't know what you don't know. And then as you go through this journey, you learn. So why would you not want to impart your wisdom on other people who are starting, when you were there once too?
Yeah. And shameless plug for that. We have a Discord community that anyone is welcome to join. If you guys go to our TikTok account, you can find the link tree and you can join our Discord community. And we also have a Facebook group that is also very community driven. Two shameless plugs there. Let's get that out there because Ariel is a huge part of our community as well. I love it. And that's huge. Just like you said, everyone starts off at the beginning and everyone starts off a little clueless of what to do. And the more helping hands that are out there, it's just building up the community and makes it that much stronger. Just like you said, all of us have different stories to say, and it's going to be different perspectives. We're not competing with anybody. All right. I need to know, why do you hate peanut butter?
I don't like the texture. I don't know. It's like a weird, my husband's obsessed with peanut butter. I don't like the texture. I don't like the taste, but there are very few things I will eat with it. One of them is peanut noodles, and the second is a Nutter Butter. That's about it.
Like that's another neurodivergent thing is you have to
It
have
has
strong
to be.
opinions Yeah, like it's either you hate peanut butter or love peanut butter. Me and my wife are the same way. I love it. She does not care for it. So that's another sign. It's just you have strong feelings one way or the
Yeah, my
other.
husband is like very big into sweets. So he loves peanut butter. He loves chocolate. He loves them together. I don't like chocolate either. I'm a weirdo. I don't like peanut butter, chocolate, or ice cream. There's
But you
very
like
few
peanut butter and chocolate together in a nut of butter.
that's about that is like it. It's like the weird
It's the
combination.
wafer. It just makes it okay. It neutralizes it.
It
It makes
must. It
everything
must
okay.
be the wafer. I don't know, but
Switzerland.
yeah.
I love that. I saw that on your submission. I was like, okay, I just need to talk about it. But that's
That's a
funny, Finn.
dividing factor for a lot of people, man. They'll be like,
Yeah.
"What? Are you an alien? You don't like peanut butter, chocolate, or ice cream?" I'm like, "No."
Well, the mouthfeel's got to be right. They got to fit the vibe.
I like chocolate with nuts or white chocolate. I don't like plain chocolate.
You're not a vanilla girl.
No. I like, but there's, or even like Rice Krispies or something. There has to be a texture. I just don't like plain
Mhm.
chocolate.
Yeah, that's funny. I think Finn, I think you're right. I think it's the neurodivergent thing.
Yeah, the mouthfeels. If they're off, it's just no one's gonna have a good day. It's just
Mouth feels.
There's your sticker. The mouth feels are off.
mouth vibes are off. Can't work.
Yep, totally wrote that down. Finn's getting stickers for his episode, and it's not even his episode.
Oh
I love
God,
it.
I'm sorry.
I love it.
I love it. No. So, what were some books that you were inspired by growing up and that kind of helped you fall in love with the community, or not the community, the book world?
So growing up, I read a lot of R.L. Stein. When I was in elementary school, obviously I read Goosebumps because everybody was reading Goosebumps.
Oh yeah.
But what I was more focused on reading was like the Fear Street, the older novels, the young adult novels. I was obsessed with, I think it's the original Fear Street trilogy. I have the covers are like so vivid in my mind, but it was with Angelica and Simon Fear, and it was like a 3-part series or whatever. I was obsessed with them. Also, Christopher Pike. I was very into a lot of that. And I want to say, oddly enough, because this tells you everything you need to know about my personality, I also read Sweet Valley High a lot. So we go from the horror stuff to like the really like chicky lit stuff. But I read a lot of that stuff as a teenager and as a kid. And then as I got a little bit older into like high school, I really fell into Laurel K. Hamilton. So like the Anita Blake series and Anne Rice and stuff like that. So those were definitely the books that I was more reading as a kid. I also really was into like novelizations of like movies, oddly enough. Spider-Man, which came out when I was in high school, I was like hugely into, and I actually wrote fanfic of it.
I was gonna ask at some point, what was your first fanfic pairing? What
My
was your
first
first kid?
fanfic was when I was really heavily into anime. I did a lot of Sailor Moon fanfic and Gundam Wing fanfic, and I used to do a crossover world where I did Gundam and Sailor Moon. And then the other big ones where I did Spider-Man fanfic from like the Spider-Man movie. And then there was probably at some point somewhere some supernatural fanfic because I was obsessed with supernaturals.
I love the fan fiction world. I think that if you create a world and someone does a fan fiction of it, you've made it. That is
Oh,
the
100%.
sign.
100%.
I love it. I know a lot of authors are like, I wrote my story and that's how I intended to tell it. No, let them tell their version of your story. That is beautiful.
I love fanfic. My God, I just love it. And I haven't read any in a long time just because I haven't had time to read it. I barely have time to read, period. But every now and then, my girlfriends are very into fanfic. My one friend, like when I was up in Romanticon, she was sending me Steady fanfic because she's a huge Steady shipper from Stranger Things. And I was reading some of that and I was enjoying it. So
Yeah, Dramoni is my first fanfic plot. Just I went down that rabbit hole and have not come back out. That is
love it.
yeah. What about you, Finn? Do you like fanfic?
So I did, like you said, it's just a matter of just finding the time to read
Yeah.
in addition to all the other books. But I would definitely, my first writing was definitely like a Kingdom Hearts self-insert fanfic.
Ooh, that's
Ooh.
So that was definitely a thing. And I got a lot of heat at my high school when I just did not finish it.
That's
Kingdom
another
Hearts.
thing. They are so the readers on fan fiction, they are a different breed of reviewer and reader.
They're
Oh my
feral, 100%. They were feral before that was a common term. Like,
yeah.
I would
100%.
love to go back to fanfic roots at some point and write a fanfic of something. I just don't know. But I also think something that's really interesting is that there are a lot of fanfics out there that like ended up becoming books later.
Yes.
So
Oh yeah.
I think that's an interesting avenue too to see how fanfic has gone from its infancy, because for me it was infancy back in the day, showing my age. But like now we have Wattpad and we have fanfics that are turned into full-on books. Twilight is on my shelf. Stuff like that.
No, and honestly, when you think about it, a lot of books that you write, they're inspired by other books or other realms or other movies or other romances or other stories. And it's essentially, if you break down and not have names in there, they're fan fictions of other things. My book that I'm writing right now, if you were to cross Howl's Moving Castle with Fantastic Beasts, the Harry Potter world, that is my fan fiction. It is literally what I'm writing.
I think as consumers, part of that is just because whether we realize it or not, we're so tuned in to the tropes. We're tuned in to how things, to the beats, so to say. I think a really good example is my husband and I watch Sentai, which is the Japanese, the Asian Power Rangers that the Power Rangers come from. Because we have seen every Power Ranger season there is. And so even like when I'm watching something like that, even if it's like we're watching Time Ranger right now, which is would have been the Time Force Rangers here, and I'm always trying to pick out what's going to happen because we are so tuned in to
100%.
how things are written or the structure of things. And I think that's one of those, it can be fun, but it can also be daunting where you're like, oh, I know this is how this is going to end because XYZ. But it can also be fun just to understand that whether we are like aware of it or not, we know those
Mhm.
structures, we know those characters, we know those tropes.
Yep.
And so it comes out when you're writing, whether you pay attention to it or not.
And that's exactly it. If you have a world that you love so much that the characters just connect with you and you are, like you said, anticipating how things are going to go and then it doesn't go that way, it's almost like, oh, what if it did go that way?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
that's how you write. And that is
Yep.
literally why every author writes, because they're like, now I need to read this. I need to know what this looks like and I need to go back and read it because this is what I'm wanting to read.
And that's exactly,
Katie,
I've gotten into a lot of situations where I wrote books because I was looking for a book and it didn't exist.
Exactly.
Katie Roberts said it really well on Threads. She said, because she was talking about how a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but very vocal section of the Sarah J. Maas fandom has come after different writers for quote unquote plagiarizing or stealing ideas from Sarah J. Maas books, ideas that have been around literally for hundreds of years. And she
Right.
put it very well when she said that writers are magpies. We just take sparkly bits from all the different
And that's
things.
exactly,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh,
And
hey.
I
Oh,
like to
oh, wait, hang
say,
on. I can't make that as your sticker. Someone already said it, right?
no, exactly. That was, I'm not going to steal from the Katie Roberts. I'm not going to, but
I was
yeah,
gonna say, I like to think of it like a cauldron, is what I say when I write. I put a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I mix it all up, and what comes out?
I love it. I love it. And that's so true. Literally, the reason why I wrote my first book is because I was like, if I can take all of these verses that I love and smash them together, what would that look like?
That's how I wrote in the cards. I was looking for like a romance or a paranormal romance that involved tarot cards and past lives and like all this stuff. And it didn't really exist, at least that I could find. And so that's how I ended up writing in the cards.
Yeah. Any of our listeners out there who are like, I have this idea, I have this world, I have this love, and I want to write it so I can read it. Guess what? You're about to be an author.
Mhm.
Welcome to the first steps of becoming addicted to writing.
Yep.
we are sorry. Our condolences.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. And
Reach
we're
out
out
for
of
support.
pins.
Also, we do not take any responsibility for the chaos that your life is about to become.
It's so funny because I remember writing Stormbringer, which I think was like my second or third book. And at that time, I didn't have too many projects going on or whatever, but I had a couple things lined up. And I remember saying to my husband then, I was like, I just need to finish this book and then I'll be good.
The famous
Why?
last
Lies.
words.
Why? Your Hayao Miyazaki ass.
And I still say that. And I have 6 books I'm working on. I'm like, I just need to finish this book and then I'm good. And he's
Yeah, he knows you lying by now.
like, uh-huh.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Your upcoming projects that you are working on right now is the Monsters of Ashwood series. Do you have something that is fixing to come out for that?
My Monsters of Ashwood series, I just completed a Kickstarter. I'm in the process of fulfilling those. And the series itself is mostly closed, but I will be at some point in the next 10 years putting out a sister series. So it will be set in the same world, but it'll be different location, different monsters, probably a bigger harem because I really want to work with maybe 5 monsters instead of 3. So there will be more in that world, not necessarily in the Monsters of Ashwood series, but in that world. But my books that are coming out currently, I have a couple coming out in anthologies. So I have the Random Romance anthology coming out, where we all got a randomized writing prompt and we had to create a story. My book, To Hell and Back, is going to be in there about a girl who is possessed by a demon and he won't leave. And you're probably wondering, how can you write a romance around that? Random Romance, you can check it out. And then also in September, I believe, the end of September, I have Be My Boo, which is coming out, is the anthology. AJ Mulligan and I wrote a male jack-o'-lantern shifter romance. I'm really excited about it.
Oh, that is fun. My first book that I wrote with a co-author, and that is an interesting experience with having two minds work
I love it.
together on something. It is a whole new level of inspiration.
I love co-writing. I probably to my own detriment. I have several co-authors, and I just love the collaborative process. I feel like there is an accountability factor there, which is a lot easier for me to write with another person than write by myself. But yeah, AJ and I just released our first co-write last month, which is Song of Silence, which is part of her Nowhere world. And the FMC is a monster, and the mates are the men, which is not something you see too often. And our jack-o'-lantern shifter romance, I'm really excited about because I like writing odd shifters sometimes and doing quirky stuff just as much as I like to do my dramatic, angsty stuff. I have a gingerbread shifter too. It's out. Invite me. And both
I think
gingerbread
I've seen
shifter
that out there. I
Jack.
didn't realize that was you. I remember seeing that.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I've come full circle because I've definitely seen that. And I was like, what the hell?
Both holiday shifters have flavored, you know what. So there you go.
Yep, that's definitely the one I saw. Yep.
That sounds like it's a sweet tooth for me.
It's very fun. I love playing with stuff like that. Trick or Treat is the name of my jack-o'-lantern shifter romance. And I actually, because I mentioned about doing research, I researched the legend of the jack-o'-lantern and where it came from. So you see some of that stuff go in there. Very fun time. It is a male romance.
That's awesome. I love that. All right. So just to wrap things up, if you guys have any time or if you guys want to support Ariel, today you have your Bite Me MonsterCon, and that's on Facebook, correct?
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute. I can't do that because this is not going to release and people are not going to be able to come in.
Oh, man.
Dang it. Oh, actually,
Go,
okay, hang on. Here we go. Live people. If anyone wants to go and support Ariel today, she has something that is happening on Facebook today. So you guys are the only ones who gets to go and do that. I will make a clip from this and share it later. Go support Ariel today if you can. And then okay, so this can be on the podcast. Let's go back to that. If you guys want to join Ariel's community, you guys can go to Facebook and go to Ariel Dawn's Dusk Chasers. That is her community that you guys can get a part of. And this will come out in time for you guys to enjoy her 13 days of Halloween. Also, you guys go check out her books that she has out. She's got a completed series out. She's got her Monsters of Ashwood series, which that one sounds very awesome. I'm excited about that one. And then her Forevermore world. Let's promote those. You guys go read them and review them and let her know that you heard from them here on the podcast. All right. Thank you guys for listening in to Lemons Listening Library. It was amazing. And thank you to my co-host, Finn. You are awesome. And Ariel, it was so fun meeting you and talking to you.
It was so much fun being here.
Ariel, I have one more burning question that I need you to answer before we leave. You're on a monster dating game show. What monster do you take out for a date?
Okay, if we're considering vampires monsters, then vampires, because I'm just obsessed and I need to have fangs in my neck. That would be great.
Fair. That's a respectable answer. Okay, I'm done. You can sign off now. I'm done.
No, that was a perfect closing. I love it. All right, bye guys. Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemons Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening.